Ellen DeGeneres had interviewed thousands of guests dealing with medical challenges and memory issues throughout her decades-long career, from individuals recovering from brain injuries to families coping with dementia, but nothing could have prepared her for the afternoon, when what seemed like a routine conversation about amnesia recovery and rebuilding identity would explode into one of the most emotionally stunning and personally revelatory moments she had ever experienced. What started as an inspiring story about medical recovery became an unexpected journey into her own forgotten past, when a guest's returning memory unlocked secrets that had been buried in both their minds for over 20 years. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon at the Ellen Studios, and the atmosphere was gentle and hopeful as they prepared for what was scheduled to be an encouraging episode about neurological recovery, the resilience of the human brain, and the inspiring journeys of people who had overcome severe memory loss. Ellen, wearing a soft emerald blazer over cream-colored pants, was looking forward to interviewing David Chen, a 42-year-old former teacher whose remarkable recovery from complete amnesia following a car accident had captured the attention of medical professionals and given hope to families dealing with similar challenges. David's story was exactly the kind of medically fascinating and emotionally uplifting narrative that Ellen loved to feature. Someone who had lost all memory of his previous life, had spent 3 years rebuilding his identity from nothing, and was now working to help other amnesia patients navigate the complex psychological and practical challenges of reconstructing a life without access to their own history. According to his preliminary materials, David had no memory of anything before his accident, had learned to live with a completely blank past, and had found purpose in supporting others facing similar memory challenges. Our next guest lost everything in a car accident, not just his physical abilities, but every memory of who he was, Ellen announced to the sympathetic studio audience. For 3 years, he's been building a new identity from scratch, showing incredible courage in creating a meaningful life without any connection to his past. His journey reminds us that sometimes starting over isn't just possible, it's powerful. Please welcome amnesia recovery advocate David Chen. The audience offered warm, encouraging applause as David walked onto the stage with careful but confident steps. He was a gentle-looking man with kind eyes and graying hair, wearing a simple navy suit that suggested someone who had learned to present himself professionally, despite having no memory of his previous life. What struck Ellen most was the quality of alert curiosity in his expression, someone who seemed to be constantly observing and learning, as if every experience were new and potentially meaningful. "David, welcome to the show," Ellen said warmly as they embraced gently. "Thank you for having me, Ellen." "This is quite an experience," David replied, his voice carrying a slight hesitancy, as if he were still learning how to navigate social interactions. "Tell us about your accident and what it was like to wake up with no memory of your life." David's expression became serious as he began sharing his medical journey. "Ellen, 3 years ago I woke up in a hospital with doctors and nurses calling me by a name that meant nothing to me. They showed me photos of a life I couldn't remember, told me about relationships that felt like stories about a stranger. That must have been terrifying. How do you rebuild an identity when you have no foundation?" "You start with the present moment and work forward," David explained thoughtfully. "I had to decide who I wanted to be based on how I felt in the moment, not on who I apparently used to be." As David spoke, Ellen began experiencing an unusual sensation. Something about his voice, his mannerisms, the way he tilted his head when thinking, felt strangely familiar in a way she couldn't identify. "David, this might sound odd, but do you ever have moments where something feels familiar even though you can't remember why?" David looked at Ellen with sudden intensity. "Actually, yes, and Ellen, sitting here talking to you is giving me that feeling very strongly." Ellen felt a chill, as David's words triggered her own vague sense of recognition. "What kind of feeling?" "Like," David paused, pressing his hand to his forehead as if chasing an elusive thought. "Like I've sat across from you before, but in a different place, somewhere more casual, more personal." Ellen's heartbeat quickened as she began experiencing her own fragments of half-remembered images. "David, when you think about that feeling, what do you see?" David closed his eyes as if trying to capture fleeting memories. I see. A kitchen? Yellow walls? Someone laughing? Ellen, this is strange, but I think I hear your laugh in this memory that shouldn't exist. Ellen felt her breath catch as David's description triggered a flood of images she hadn't thought about in decades. David, what's your full name? Before the accident. David Alexander Chen, he replied. Why? Ellen felt the room spinning as the name unlocked a cascade of memories she had buried so deeply she had almost forgotten they existed. David? Oh my God, David, I think you're Danny. David looked at her with confusion and growing alarm. Who's Danny? You're Danny Chen, Ellen said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. You were my best friend's little brother. We lived next door to each other when we were kids. You used to follow me and Sarah around everywhere. David stared at Ellen with an expression of desperate concentration. Sarah, that name. Ellen, I think something is happening. I'm seeing flashes of a girl with curly hair, and you, but younger? Ellen was openly crying now as 20-year-old memories crashed back with startling clarity. Sarah Chen was my best friend from age 12 to 16. You were her annoying little brother who had the biggest crush on me. You used to leave me drawings and follow me to school. Drawings, David whispered, and suddenly his eyes widened with shock. Oh my God, I remember drawing. I remember giving you pictures of flowers, and you kept them? I kept every single one, Ellen sobbed. David, you were such a sweet kid. You wrote me notes telling me you were going to marry me when you grew up. David's face was transforming as memories flickered back to life. Ellen, Ellie, you let me call you Ellie. And you never made fun of me for following you around. Because you were adorable and I loved you like a little brother, Ellen replied through her tears. David, what happened to your family? I lost touch with Sarah when we moved to a different state. I don't know, David said, his voice breaking. The doctors said no family members came forward after my accident. They assumed I had no living relatives. Ellen felt her heart breaking for the isolation David had endured. David, Sarah was your sister. Your parents were Mr. and Mrs. Chen. They owned a small restaurant. You had a dog named Biscuit. Biscuit, David exclaimed, and suddenly he was laughing and crying simultaneously. I remember Biscuit, a little brown terrier who stole food off the counter. Ellen was amazed at watching David's memories return in real time. Yes, and you taught him to do tricks. You were so proud of that dog. David looked at Ellen with wonder and recognition. Ellie, you used to let me sit with you and Sarah when you did homework in your backyard. You helped me with my math. Because you were struggling in school, but you were actually really smart, Ellen remembered. You just learned differently than other kids. David pressed his hands to his temples as more memories flooded back. I remember now I became a teacher. I wanted to help kids who struggled like I did. Ellen felt overwhelmed by the implications of what was happening. David, your memories are coming back because of our connection. Seeing me is unlocking your past. David nodded, tears streaming down his face. Ellen, for 3 years I've felt like I was floating in space with no anchor to anything real. But sitting here with you, I feel grounded, like I belong somewhere. Ellen turned to address the audience, many of whom were crying as they witnessed this extraordinary reunion. Folks, what we're experiencing here is nothing short of miraculous. David's memories are literally returning before our eyes. She looked back at David with profound emotion. David, what's it like to suddenly remember who you were? It's like waking up from a dream where I was lost and finding out I actually had a home all along, David replied. Ellen, you're giving me back my childhood, my identity, my sense of belonging in the world. Ellen felt the weight of responsibility for David's recovered memories. David, I need to help you find Sarah and your family. They probably don't know about your accident. David's expression became urgent. Do you think they're still alive? Do you think they've been looking for me? I think they've been wondering what happened to you for 3 years, Ellen said with conviction. David, we're going to find them. We're going to reunite you with your real family. Ellen made a decision that felt both necessary and emotional. David, I want you to stay in Los Angeles for a few days while we locate your sister and parents. I'm going to personally make sure you're reconnected with everyone who loves you. Ellen, you've already given me back more than I ever hoped to recover, David said with gratitude. You've given me proof that I was loved, that I mattered to people, that my life before the accident had meaning. Ellen addressed the cameras with deep emotion. What happened here today shows us the incredible power of human connection and the resilience of love. Sometimes the people we lose find their way back to us in the most unexpected ways. 3 weeks later, Ellen provided an update that brought her to tears. Through a private investigator, they had located Sarah, who had indeed been searching for her missing brother for 3 years. The Chen family had been devastated when David disappeared and had never stopped looking for him. 6 months later, all 3 Chen siblings appeared together on Ellen's show for a reunion that became one of the most watched episodes in the show's history. David's memory had continued to return, triggered by his renewed relationships with family members, and he had resumed his career as a teacher with a special focus on students with learning differences. David, Ellen said during the reunion episode, how has it felt to rebuild your relationship with your family? Like coming home after being lost in the wilderness for years, David replied, sitting between Ellen and Sarah. But Ellen, you were the key that unlocked everything. Our childhood friendship was apparently strong enough to survive even complete amnesia. And Sarah, Ellen continued, what was it like to get your brother back? Sarah, now a social worker in her 40s, wiped tears from her eyes. Ellen, when you called to tell me Danny was alive, I couldn't believe it. We had searched everywhere, filed missing person reports, hired investigators to find out he had been suffering from amnesia this whole time. It was heartbreaking, but also miraculous. Ellen felt deeply moved by the family's gratitude and resilience. What this experience taught me is that love really does transcend everything: time, distance, even memory loss. The bonds we form in childhood can be strong enough to survive any trauma. The episode sparked international discussions about amnesia, the importance of patient advocacy, and the power of early relationships to survive even severe neurological damage. What David taught us that day, Ellen reflected months later, is that sometimes the most profound healing happens when we encounter someone who knew us before we lost ourselves. Love really can call us back from anywhere. David's story became a case study for neurologists studying memory recovery and the role of emotional connections in triggering the return of lost memories. Sometimes, Ellen would say in subsequent interviews, the most important thing we can do for someone is simply remember who they used to be until they can remember themselves. David showed me that love leaves marks on the soul that no accident can completely erase. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can offer someone isn't just compassion for who they are now, but recognition of who they were before the world changed them. And sometimes the most powerful medicine for a broken memory is being seen and loved by someone who remembers your heart.